My name is Alara Vance and I remember the cold more than the fire. The fire was the end of my first life, but the cold, the icy, suffocating water of the lake I threw myself into, was the final punctuation. It was the cold of despair, of a love turned to poison, of a reputation shredded by the very man I would have died for. And I did die for him. Just not in the way he claimed. In that final, gasping moment, submerged in the dark, everything became clear. I had done nothing wrong. I had loved with a fierce, unwavering loyalty. I had rushed into a burning building to save Julian Thorne, my childhood sweetheart, the boy I was destined to marry. I dragged his unconscious body from the jaws of death, my own skin sizzling, my future beauty sacrificed in an instant for his life. His legs, however, were crushed by a falling beam. He would never walk again. When he woke, the Julian I knew was gone. In his place was a creature of bitterness and blame. He accused me of pushing the beam onto him, of deliberately crippling him so he would be bound to me. My ruined face, he said, was a convenient excuse, a trap to garner his pity. He screamed that I had let the girl he truly loved, a fragile, impoverished student named Chloe Reed, perish in the flames out of jealousy. The world believed the handsome, tragic heir over the disfigured, obsessed fiancé. Online I became a monster. The vitriol was a torrent, a digital lynch mob that chased me from my home, my life, my sanity. The cold water was the only escape from the heat of their hatred. And I wasn't cold anymore. I was warm. The air was sweet with the scent of gardenias and expensive perfume. The hum of polite conversation and clinking champagne flutes was a symphony I hadn't heard in half a lifetime. I was standing in the grand ballroom of my family's estate, wearing a gown of sapphire silk, my skin smooth and unblemished, my face whole. It was my 20th birthday party. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a gilded cage of a second chance. I scanned the room, my eyes, once dull with defeat, now sharp with the clarity of a ghost. And there he was. Julian Thorne. As beautiful and whole as I remembered him from before the fire. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his suit tailored to fit his athletic frame. But his eyes, those hazel eyes that once made my heart flutter, were darting toward his phone, then toward the grand entrance, a restless energy about him. He was waiting. He was always waiting for her. His mother, Eleanor Thorne, a woman who had been a second mother to me, noticed his distraction. Her voice, laced with displeasure, cut through my reverie. Julian, today is Alara's birthday. If you're not present with her, where else could you possibly need to be? I watched as he smoothly transitioned into performance mode. He grabbed my hand, his touch once electric, now feeling like a snake coiling around my wrist. Mother, of course I'm with Alara. We've been childhood sweethearts. I've never missed a birthday. It's just, the moon is so beautiful tonight. I thought I'd take her into the gardens to admire it for a while. The lie was so effortless. In my first life, this moment had filled me with a romantic thrill. Now I saw it for what it was. A flimsy excuse to get me alone so he could ditch me for Chloe. Eleanor Thorne softened, pacified by the image of the perfect couple. Fine, take her out for a bit. But be back soon to cut the cake. Don't get too carried away. As soon as her back was turned, his grip on my hand turned from an affectionate hold to an impatient pull. He dragged me through the French doors and into the night, not caring that I was wearing razor-thin John Vito Rossi stilettos that bit into the soft grass with every step. But the pain was grounding. It was a reminder that I was alive here now. And my reason, once clouded by my love for him, was now crystalline, focused on a single burning objective: to witness with my own eyes how he would destroy himself. Heaven truly had eyes. The moment we were out of earshot, he dropped my hand as if it were contaminated. He pulled out his phone, his entire body leaning into the device, a shield against me. Chloe? Did you get the flowers? And the cake? I promised I'd be with you on your birthday and I'll keep my word. I just bought your gift. I'm heading to your place now. Really? I swear I'm not lying. I'll see you soon. Each word was a shard of ice, but my heart was an iceberg. In my previous life, this call had felt like a physical blow, sending me into a spiral of jealous rage. I was the one who had grown up with him, shared secrets in tree houses, promised to marry under the old oak tree. He was the one who had sent me roses every birthday, who had told me his feelings were never brotherly but deeply, passionately in love. I had believed him so completely that I molded my entire existence around his. I gave up prestigious universities to stay by his side. For him I had run into a fire. For him I had lost my face. For him I had endured a half-year of hellish accusations. And my sincerity had earned me a watery grave. Now as he hung up and turned to me, his face was a mask of feigned guilt. Alara, I'm sorry. I have to go. I need to be with Chloe. Everyone is here celebrating you, but she's all alone. She needs me. I smiled. It was a gentle, understanding smile that didn't reach my eyes. Of course, Julian. Chloe really does need you more. Don't worry about your mother. I'll cover for you. Oh, and wish Chloe a happy birthday for me. His step faltered. He turned back, suspicion darkening his handsome features. You're being agreeable. No sulking. No tantrums. Don't tell me you're planning to run to my mother the second I leave. In my past life, that was exactly what I would have done. I would have cried, screamed, and ultimately run to Eleanor, creating a scene that painted me as the hysterical, possessive girlfriend. Not this time. I curved my lips, a cold glint in my gaze. How could I? I just suddenly figured something out. He frowned. Figured out what? I lifted my head, gazing at the brilliant, indifferent moon. I've been using our childhood bond and that silly childhood engagement as shackles to tie you to me. But the truth is you stopped loving me long ago. On this 20th birthday I'll return your freedom. And in doing so I'll set myself free as well. I wish you and Chloe a lifetime of happiness. May you soon have children together. He gave a mocking, disbelieving smile. Alara, if you've really figured things out, then I'm glad for you. Honestly, I've only ever seen you as a little sister. He reached out and patted my head, a patronizing, dismissive gesture that once would have made me melt. Be good. Let me finish celebrating Chloe's birthday and then I'll come find you. I once promised I'd spend every one of your birthdays with you. I haven't forgotten. The perfect scumbag, dangling vague hope while running to another woman. But his light no longer blinded me. It didn't matter anymore. In about an hour he would become a cripple. The thought made my smile burn even brighter. I waved him off with a gentle grace I didn't feel and walked back into the party, the sound of the string quartet washing over me. I was reborn. And the reckoning had just begun. The ballroom was a whirl of silk, laughter, and clinking crystal. I moved through it like a ghost who knew the future, a serene smile plastered on my face. I could feel the weight of the jade bracelet on my wrist, Eleanor Thorne's peace offering, a piece she had worn for 15 years. In my first life I'd refused it, deeming it too valuable to accept before marriage. Now its cool, heavy presence was a trophy. A first installment on a debt that was about to come due. I even accepted a dance from a handsome, smiling man whose name I didn't catch. My body moved on autopilot, my mind 1,000 miles away, in a cheaply decorated suburban villa where scented oil was burning, and seduction was turning to inferno. Eleanor found me as the dance ended, her face a mixture of guilt and maternal concern. It's all my fault for spoiling Julian too much. Don't worry, Lara. Once we're home I'll make sure to discipline him properly. She was trying to soothe me, to secure the future of the Thorne Corporation, which had risen to its heights on the back of my family's, the Vances, influence and capital. I was the key to their kingdom and they knew it. With a warm smile she added, I know today has wronged you. I promise such things won't happen again in the future. I let my smile be radiant, forgiving. Auntie, he only had to leave because something unexpected came up. I truly don't mind and my parents don't blame him either. As long as I have you and Uncle by my side I'm already happy. The words were honey and she drank them in, relieved. I was playing my part perfectly. As I spoke I discreetly glanced at the delicate diamond watch on my wrist. By now Julian would have arrived. The lights would be dim, Chloe would be in some flimsy nightwear, and they would be toasting with cheap champagne he'd bought on the way, pretending it was vintage. They would be so wrapped up in their little drama, their stolen secret birthday celebration, that they would forget the one crucial rule of using that particular scented oil. You never ever left it burning unattended. Chloe was a copycat. She saw what I had, the luxury, the affection, the status, and she mimicked it without understanding it. She used the same oils, the same perfumes, but she had no servants to watch over them. In my first life, my desperate, lovesick sprint to her door had been the only thing that saved Julian from being roasted alive. This time I would not be going anywhere. but letting them die quickly was too kind. It wasn't justice. It was an ending. I wanted them to live with the consequences. As the night's fireworks began to paint the sky in brilliant shades of sapphire, my favorite color, I slipped away to a quiet balcony. With a new phone and a prepaid SIM card I'd acquired for this exact purpose, I dialed 119. Fire department, a calm voice answered. My own voice was a panicked, breathy whisper, the perfect imitation of a terrified neighbor. Hello? I think I see smoke coming from 42 Willow Lane in the Crestwood subdivision. It's billowing from the windows. Please hurry. I gave no name. I hung up. The deed was done. I returned to the party just as the magnificent multi-tiered cake was being wheeled out. My parents, Alexander and Isabella Vance, beamed at me, their pride a tangible force. I smiled back, a genuine flicker of warmth piercing my cold resolve. I would not let them down this time. I would not let a boy, a man, break their daughter and tarnish their name. The news of the fire arrived like a thunderclap just as the last of the guests were saying their goodbyes. A hushed whisper from my father's business partner, a frantic call on Eleanor Thorne's phone. The mood shifted from celebratory to grim in an instant. An accident, at a villa in Crestwood. Julian was there. The exodus to the hospital was a somber procession. The sterile, antiseptic smell of the place was a visceral punch to my gut, a flood of memories I had to forcibly suppress. The hallway outside Julian's room was packed with friends, relatives, and business associates, all wearing masks of concern. He had just come out of surgery. The doctors had amputated his left leg below the knee. The right was so badly damaged it was doubtful he would ever walk on it again. The falling beam had been merciless, just as I remembered. When we were allowed in, the scene was a perfect replica of my past. Julian lay pale and broken on the white bed, his body tethered to beeping machines. The air was thick with the scent of blood and despair. Eleanor was weeping softly by his side. My parents stood stoically behind me, their expressions unreadable. Julian, my father began, his voice firm. What on earth happened? You were just at Alara's party. Why did you run off to Crestwood? How did a fire break out? Julian was too drugged, too trapped in his pain to form a coherent sentence. He just moaned, his eyes screwed shut. All eyes turned to me. I was the one who knew. I was the link. I took a small, hesitant step forward, my voice soft but clear enough to carry in the hushed room. He went to celebrate Chloe Reed's birthday. I let the name hang in the air for a moment. She's the poor girl whose tuition I once sponsored. But starting from sophomore year, Julian began sponsoring her himself. I paused, injecting a note of innocent confusion into my tone. Maybe he felt that the 3,000 yuan I gave her each month wasn't enough. So he switched to giving her 30,000 instead. Maybe even more. He even gave her a supplementary card to spend freely. The silence that followed was deafening. These were all sharp, business-savvy adults. They didn't need a diagram. They instantly understood the dynamic. The wealthy heir, the charity case, the secret villa, the lies. I saw the dawning horror on Eleanor's face, the thunderous cloud descending on my father's. Mr. Thorne looked as if he'd been slapped. Eleanor rushed to smooth things over, her voice trembling. Julian has always been kind, always eager to help others. From now on, if he wants to support anyone, it will have to go through the family's charity fund. Alara, don't misunderstand, there is absolutely nothing between him and that girl. He always said that after graduation he would marry you. Your mother and I have even chosen the hotel. She was desperate, trying to lock me down before I could slip away, before the Vance support vanished and took the Thorne empire with it. But I was done being a pawn. I spoke, my voice sweet but firm, cutting through her panic. But Auntie, didn't Julian already tell you that he has only ever seen me as a younger sister? He said so himself at my birthday party today. And I also made it clear to him. I wished him and Chloe a lifetime of happiness and hoped they'd soon have children. As for me, I turned my gaze to Julian, who was watching me through a haze of pain and medication, his eyes wide with shock and dawning fury. I've long since only regarded him as an older brother. I smiled at him, a beautiful, chilling smile. Julian, I've helped you tell Uncle and Aunt how you really feel. Aren't you happy? Oh right. Where's my sister-in-law? I heard she was badly burned. But don't worry, Uncle and Aunt surely won't stand by idly when it comes to their future daughter-in-law. They'll definitely find the best doctors to treat her. I delivered the final blow with the precision of a surgeon. Honestly though, you're both adults. How could you play such little romantic games that ended up burning down a house? Far too careless. That was it. The final weight that broke the camel's back. The Thorns' faces were a study in utter humiliation. My father let out a cold, sharp snort that echoed in the tense room. Since Julian already has someone in his heart, then the engagement with my daughter ends here. From now on, don't bring it up again. The sentence was passed. The alliance was severed. Eleanor looked like she might faint. Mr. Thorne, his jaw clenched, knew there was only one way to even begin salvaging this catastrophe. This is Julian's fault for wronging Alara, he said, his voice gravelly with suppressed rage. The villa development in the Northern District. Consider it compensation for Alara. After all, our families have shared so many years of friendship. Let's not let one unworthy child ruin everything. The Northern District villas were their most valuable real estate project, worth nearly $500 million. It was a massive concession, a desperate bid to prevent my family from withdrawing all our joint investments. My parents, proud and furious, would have refused on principle. But I was no longer principled in the way of pride. I was practical in the way of vengeance. Before they could speak, I nodded, my gracious smile back in place. Uncle, you're being too serious. I've always seen Julian as an older brother. I lifted my wrist, the jade bracelet catching the harsh fluorescent light. This was a gift Auntie just gave me. It's truly beautiful and I love it. If you and Auntie don't mind, why not treat me as your goddaughter from now on? That way, whenever I crave Auntie's seafood porridge, I can come openly to eat. The suggestion was a masterstroke. It offered them a face-saving measure, a way to keep a tether to the Vance power without the pressure of marriage. It solidified my position and my access to their lives. Eleanor's eyes welled with fresh, grateful tears. She moved forward and held my hand tightly. Good child, whenever you want to eat, just come. Your godmother will surely cook for you. I responded sweetly. Yes, godmother. The atmosphere in the room shifted, becoming warm and harmonious around our little tableau. No one paid any attention to the man lying on the bed, his body broken, his future in shambles. Julian Thorne, if anyone happened to glance his way, saw only disdain and mockery in their eyes. And in mine, as I met his devastated gaze, he saw the cold, calm satisfaction of a debt beginning to be repaid. This was only the prologue. His suffering and Chloe's was far from over. The weeks following the fire were a whirlwind of calculated moves. The Northern District Villa project was officially signed over to me. My father, Alexander Vance, initially balked. We are not in the business of taking blood money, Alara. Our name is not for sale. I placed a calming hand on his arm. It's not blood money, father. It's seed capital. And it's not for the Vance Corporation. It's for me. He looked at me, truly looked at me, perhaps for the first time since my rebirth. The naive, love-struck girl was gone, replaced by a woman with eyes that held a century of cold wisdom. What are you planning? The world is changing, Dad. Traditional industries are about to hit a wall. Commerce, streaming media, new energy. That's the future. The Thorns gave us a real estate project. I'm going to turn it into the launch pad for something entirely new. With his hesitant blessing, I didn't just sell the villas. I liquidated the entire development with a ruthless efficiency that stunned the old guard of our business circle. Cash flowed in like a tidal wave, and I immediately channeled it into the sectors I knew from my previous life's memories were on the verge of explosive growth. I invested in a fledgling e-commerce platform, a video streaming service that was still operating out of a garage, and a nearly bankrupt research firm working on lithium-ion batteries. My parents watched, their concern a palpable force in our home. My mother, Isabella, would bring me tea late at night as I pored over financial reports and market analyses. Laura, darling, ambition is good, but your steps must be steady. You've always had your own judgment and we won't stop you, but we hope you'll slow down a little. Business can't be rushed. I would just smile and nod, handing her my latest financial report. In just over a month, my net profits had already far surpassed the combined annual profits of the 3 listed companies my family owned. The numbers were so audacious they seemed like fiction. The more my parents read, the more astonished they became. My father, by the last page, could no longer contain his excitement. He slammed a hand on the desk, a wide grin breaking across his stern features. As expected of my daughter. You really are capable. Your mother and I have lived this long, but we've never seen anyone invest with such accuracy. Every move is perfectly timed with the market trends. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. Honestly, I think you're still being too cautious. Wait, let me call the finance department to transfer 50 million into your company's account right away. If that's not enough, just tell me. We don't need anyone else's money. Ridiculous. Their sudden shift from caution to fervent support was both touching and darkly amusing. With the memories of my past life, I was like a grandmaster descending into a beginner's village. Making money was no different from breathing. My parents, swept up in my momentum, launched a comprehensive expansion strategy, steering our family's century-old corporation away from its traditional roots and into the brave new world of tech and green energy. With abundant funds and my foresight, it took only a short time for the Vance name to become synonymous with innovation, praised as the leader of a new era. As the highest-level manager, I arranged everything with a cool competence, and then once the machine was humming, I quietly stepped back. I began my life as a leisurely boss. The reason was simple. Julian Thorne and Chloe Reed had just been discharged from the hospital. It was time to free my hands and take care of them personally. In the days before their release, I had not been idle. I hired a talented, hungry online novelist and provided her with the inspiration for a tragic viral love story. A tale of a wealthy scion and a poor student, their love so fierce it literally burned, a modern-day Romeo and Juliet. I paid a savvy media team to spread this romanticized narrative across every platform, from tabloid headlines to social media feeds. The public ate it up. The story of Julian and Chloe's great love was everywhere. Because of that manufactured public sentiment, the Thornes couldn't simply throw Chloe out. They were forced to pay for her ongoing medical care, housing her in a private wing of a rehabilitation facility. They were trapped by the very fairy tale I had written for them. Carrying a basket of obscenely expensive fruit I had no intention of eating, I knocked on the door of Julian's apartment. It was in the same upscale complex as my own penthouse. Today was the day they were officially coming home. The atmosphere inside was the opposite of celebratory. It was a morgue. Eleanor Thorne's face, usually a mask of polite composure, was tight with icy displeasure. Only when she saw me did it soften into a bright, desperate smile. "Alara, you've been so busy these days. Finally, you have a break and you still took the time to visit me. I'm so happy." She fussed over me, a stark contrast to the way she completely ignored the other woman in the room. "Wait a moment. I'll call your uncle back from his meeting early. Look at you. You've gotten so thin lately. Are you not eating well? It makes my heart ache." Her performative warmth twisted Chloe's face into a mask of pure, unadulterated jealousy. Or it would have, if her face were still capable of clear expression. The fire had ravaged her features. The once delicate heart-shaped face was now a landscape of angry red scars and grafted skin. The ferocity in her eyes was unmistakable, though burning through the ruined canvas. Julian, from his wheelchair, scolded me, his voice weak but sharp. "Why haven't you come to see me in the hospital all this time? I texted you but you never replied." I hadn't even had time to answer before Eleanor gave a cold, sharp snort. Alara had important matters. During this time she built a media company from scratch and in no time rose to the top of the industry. She also led Livestream e-commerce into international markets. From now on, when you speak to her, you'd better show respect. She is now my goddaughter. If you dare to upset her, I will personally teach you both a lesson you'll never forget. Her voice carried the weight of a queen pronouncing a decree. The glance she cast at Chloe was so frigid it could have frozen hell over. Julian's face darkened, but he said nothing. Chloe's eyes, however, brimmed with tears, trying to replicate the pear blossom in the rain pitifulness that had once captivated him. The effect was grotesque, more like a monster with acute conjunctivitis. I seized the moment to light the fuse. "Eleanor, I'm suddenly craving your seafood porridge," I said sweetly. She immediately brightened, her entire being pivoting to this simple domestic task. "Of course, darling. I'll make it for you myself." She bustled off to the kitchen, pulling a startled servant in her wake. The moment she was gone, the air thickened. I turned to Julian, my expression one of gentle concern. "Julian, I'm sorry I didn't visit you earlier. Partly it was because I was too busy, but also because I was afraid Chloe might misunderstand and be upset." I let my voice drop to a conspiratorial whisper. Still, we're childhood sweethearts. We grew up together. That day, if you hadn't stubbornly insisted on keeping your promise to spend every birthday with me, you wouldn't have rushed off to celebrate Chloe's birthday and nearly gotten into that accident running a red light. Though nothing happened in the end, just thinking back on it still makes me shiver. It was a masterful lie woven from a thread of truth, his desperate rush to get to her and designed to fester. To Chloe, who had always seen me as the ultimate threat, my words were gasoline on the smoldering coals of her insecurity. Here she was, her body burned, her face destroyed, and I was still the pristine, powerful memory in Julian's mind, the one he had risked a car accident for. Driven half-mad by my provocation and Mrs. Thorne's open contempt, Chloe began her descent. She started demanding plastic surgery. Not just restorative surgery but a full transformation. She wanted skin grafts from the most expensive specialists, jawline reshaping, breast augmentation. A complete overhaul funded by the Thorne fortune. At first Julian, playing the heartbroken but devoted lover, pretended to object. There's no need for surgery. It's painful and I don't want you to suffer. But after a few of her hysterical, screaming tantrums, he quickly capitulated. He couldn't stand looking at her grotesque face any longer. He even asked his mother to hire the best cosmetic surgeons money could buy. Plastic surgery was a long, isolating process, requiring extended hospitalization. The doctors in that department were all young, handsome, and paid to be attentive. Meanwhile, Julian was struggling through the brutal, spirit-crushing agony of physical therapy, learning to walk with a prosthetic leg. His world was one of pain, frustration, and humiliation. So I arranged for him a companion. A pretty, gentle, infinitely patient nurse named Sarah, who was always by his side, comforting and encouraging him. With her soft-spoken companionship, his motivation for recovery improved significantly. I had thought Julian and Chloe were a pair bound by life and death love, inseparable to the end. Who could have imagined that in less than 2 months, the foundation of their great love would be rotting from within? The stage was set. The players were in position. All they needed was a little push. The push came in the form of a series of anonymous photographs, sent from a burner account directly to Chloe's phone. The images were grainy but unmistakable. Julian in his physical therapy room, his head resting on Nurse Sarah's shoulder, her hand gently stroking his hair. Another showed her feeding him a spoonful of soup, their eyes locked. They were intimate, tender moments that spoke of a connection far deeper than that of patient and caregiver. Chloe received them just hours after her latest round of skin grafts, her body a map of fresh incisions and searing pain. The morphine haze did nothing to dull the white-hot spike of betrayal that lanced through her. She discharged herself against medical advice, and fueled by a cocktail of pharmaceuticals and rage, she stormed into Julian's apartment. She wasn't lucky enough to catch them in a compromising position, but she found Sarah tidying up the living room. It was enough. "You shameless whore!" Chloe shrieked, her voice a ragged tear in the quiet apartment. She lunged, her surgical wounds screaming in protest, and slapped Sarah hard across the face. The sound was a sharp crack. "You bitch! How dare you seduce my boyfriend? I'll kill you, you vixen!" Julian, who had been resting in his bedroom, wheeled himself out, his face a mask of fury and embarrassment. "Chloe, what the hell are you doing? Stop it!" But she was beyond listening. "Everyone come see," she screamed to the empty apartment as if addressing an invisible audience. "This is a mistress who preys on taken men. I'll post everything you've done online. I'll make sure the whole world knows how desperate and filthy you are." It was a chaotic, ugly scene. The scarred, hysterical woman, the crying nurse, the furious, disabled man shouting impotently from his wheelchair. And standing nearby, unnoticed in the commotion, were the reporters I had arranged in advance. Their cameras, hidden in bags and behind buttons, recorded the entire sordid spectacle. That very night, the edited footage was released online. The viral romantic fairy tale of Julian and Chloe imploded in real time. Headlines blared, "Cinderella's meltdown," and "Great love exposed as love triangle farce." The public, which had once sighed over their tragedy, now laughed at the chaotic scandal. The comment sections were merciless. "There's no such thing as true love in the world of the wealthy, just a bunch of clowns. She's a gold-digging lunatic and he's a pathetic cheater. A perfect match. Song Corporation without the Vance family's backing is nothing. A man living off a woman and still failing. What an idiot. Thorn Corporation's stock, which had only just begun to stabilize, plummeted without breaks. Arthur and Eleanor Thorn were so furious they nearly fainted. They immediately wanted to halt all of Chloe's cosmetic surgery and confine her to the house. But Chloe, perched on the peak of public attention and unhinged by betrayal, was no longer a lamb to be controlled. She threatened them, her voice shrill over the phone. If you cut off my treatments, I'll leave him. I'll go on every talk show and tell them how you've treated me. I'll make Julian the biggest laughingstock in this country. Cornered, humiliated, and financially bleeding, the Thorns capitulated. They agreed to continue her treatments and paid her an enormous sum as emotional compensation. In return, they forced her to hold a press conference to declare the incident a misunderstanding. She stood at the podium, her face still bandaged in places, and read the prepared statement in a monotone, claiming she had overreacted due to stress and pain medication. No one believed a word. It only invited more mockery. Julian, crushed by the public humiliation and the collapse of the narrative he'd built for himself, began showing up at my corporate headquarters. His parents no longer had the face to beg for projects, so they left it to him to play the emotional card. He lurked near my office parking lot for nearly a month before he finally managed to corner me as I was getting into my Maybach. If this were the old Julian, he would have led with arrogance and accusation, confident in the power he held over my heart. But the man in the wheelchair was a ghost of his former self. His voice was laced with a flattery that made my skin crawl. Alara, I've been looking for you so many times, but you're always busy. Are you free tonight? It's been so long since we've had a meal together. I shook my head, not even bothering to look at him directly. Julian, it's not that I'm avoiding you on purpose, but I don't dare have dinner with you. I'm afraid Chloe will suddenly go crazy again. His face paled. No, she won't. She's in the hospital for surgery right now. She doesn't have the time to cause trouble. Besides, we're childhood sweethearts. We grew up together. Sharing a meal shouldn't cause any misunderstandings. He attempted a weak smile. And if it weren't for your sponsorship, Chloe wouldn't even have made it into college. She should be grateful to you. I let out a soft, cold laugh. Do you actually believe what you're saying? I paused as if hesitating, then leaned slightly closer, my voice dropping. You've always been a simple and kind person, easy to trust others. But because of that, you're also easy to fall into traps. I let my words hang in the air. Have you ever really thought about the fire? Why did it happen so coincidentally? And who was it that called the fire department just in time? And as for all of Chloe's recent changes, shouldn't you reconsider them a little? I was planting seeds of doubt, knowing they would find fertile ground in the paranoid, broken man he had become. A man who had lost everything was especially vulnerable to the idea that he had been played. Chloe, she may have done wrong, but she wouldn't lie to me about this, he stammered, but the uncertainty was already in his eyes. Besides, she was also badly burned. I sighed, a sound of profound pity. But have you ever thought of the possibility that it was all just a play? A scheme to bind you to her? Back then, with her background, Chloe Reed would never have had the chance to marry into the Thorn family. She wouldn't have even passed your mother's background check. Yet look at her now. Not only did she manage to step through your family's doors, she also secured an enormous payout and used public opinion to tie you down. Every move you make is scrutinized, while she is free to do whatever she pleases outside. My words struck the bullseye. I could see the dam of his denial cracking. Impossible, he roared, a desperate last-ditch effort to hold on to his shattered reality. Chloe would never do that to me. You're just trying to drive us apart. I didn't argue. I simply pulled out my phone, navigated to a file and sent it to him. This was sent to me. I paid $5 million for the exclusive rights. I also warned that doctor to leave the country immediately. I looked at him, my gaze filled with a feigned, sorrowful sincerity. Julian, no matter what, we grew up together. I once truly loved you, and I really don't want to see you deceived by someone like her. That's all I'll say. The rest is up to you. I slid into the leather seat of my car and closed the door. As my driver pulled away, I watched in the rearview mirror as Julian Thorn sat frozen in his wheelchair, staring at his phone screen. On it played a crystal-clear video of Chloe Reed, her body still marked from surgeries, wrapped in a passionate embrace with her handsome cosmetic surgeon. The howl of pure, unadulterated fury that echoed through the parking garage was the most beautiful symphony I had heard in either of my lifetimes. The final act of their tragedy was about to begin. The howl from the parking garage was the starting pistol. I didn't need to see what happened next. I could orchestrate it from a distance with the calm precision of a conductor. Julian's rage was a predictable, volatile chemical reaction, and Chloe, doped on painkillers and self-pity, was the perfect catalyst. That very night he sent 2 burly aides from the rehabilitation center to the hospital. They hauled Chloe out of her private room, still in her surgical gown, barely coherent. She had just undergone breast augmentation. The implants were fresh, the pain a constant, searing fire. She was in no state to walk, let alone be manhandled, but Julian was past caring about such details. She was dragged back to his apartment like a sack of meat, a rag doll for his wrath. The moment the door closed behind her, stumbling and disoriented, he didn't speak. He simply wheeled himself forward and struck her, a hard, open-handed slap across her already swollen face. The force of it sent her reeling against the wall. "Are you insane?" she shrieked, clutching her cheek, the shock cutting through the pharmaceutical haze. "I just came out of surgery. Do you have any idea how dangerous this is?" In the past, her tantrums had cowed him. He would become a whipped dog, bowing his head, swallowing his pride, even blowing dry her hair or washing her feet to atone for imagined slights. But the video had shattered the last vestiges of that dynamic. The man in the wheelchair was no longer a penitent lover. He was a vengeful king presiding over the execution of a traitor. Dangerous. Julian's voice was a low, venomous snarl. "You dare talk to me about danger?" He raised his hand again and delivered 2 more resounding slaps, one after the other, with a force that spoke of months of pent-up humiliation and physical therapy-strengthened arms. Her newly reconstructed nose immediately began to bleed, crimson staining the white bandages. Her painted lips, recently collagen-injected, split open. Chloe clutched her face, horror dawning in her eyes. This was a new Julian. A broken one. "Julian, how dare you hit me? What right do you have? If not for you, would I have ended up like this? Do you know how agonizing these surgeries are? You ruined my best years." Her voice scaled into a hysterical scream. "You think you're still the young master of the Thorne family? You're nothing now but a cripple. A useless, worthless failure. And you still dare to hit me. I'll fight you to the death." She launched herself at him, a blur of claws and teeth, fueled by a feral desperation. But a woman, even a furious one, is no match for a man's upper body strength, especially one who has spent months building his arms to compensate for his dead legs. And she was already broken, her body a collection of fresh wounds. He caught her by the hair, yanking her head back with a brutal jerk. "You filthy, treacherous whore. I have every right to hit you. I'll beat you to death if that's what it takes to vent my anger," he roared, his face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. "You think I don't know? It was you who set that fire. You who staged the act of being hurt for me just to force me into marriage. You used a pitiful scheme and almost fooled me." He smashed her head down hard against the sharp corner of the marble coffee table. The sickening, wet thud was a sound I would have paid to hear. "And you dare accuse me of cheating?" he screamed, his voice cracking. "What about you? How many men have you already slept with? The cosmetic surgeon, the nurses, hell, even the delivery guy. You probably wouldn't have spared any of them." The 2 of them tore into each other on the expensive Persian rug, a whirlwind of flailing limbs, guttural curses, and the coppery smell of blood. It was no longer a fight. It was a mutual destruction, a release of all the bottled resentment and hatred that had festered between them since the beginning. Each blow was aimed not to win but to annihilate. By the time Arthur and Eleanor Thorne returned home from a futile meeting with their panicked investors, it was over. They opened the door to a scene from a slaughterhouse. Chloe Reed lay unconscious in a spreading pool of her own blood, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. The pristine white apartment was spattered with red. Eleanor's scream was one of pure, unadulterated terror. Not for Chloe but for the consequences. Arthur, his face ashen, immediately called for an ambulance. The doctor said if she'd been brought in 3 minutes later, she would have bled to death. Her life was saved, but the person she was meant to be was erased. The brutal impact had ruptured her new breast implants, causing catastrophic internal damage. Her skull was fractured in 3 places from the impact with the table, resulting in a severe traumatic brain injury. Worst of all, her spine was shattered. She would never walk again. She was condemned to lie in a bed, a conscious, broken doll for the rest of her life. Completely, utterly crippled. Julian Thorne was arrested at the hospital. The charge: intentionally causing grievous bodily harm. For a man already disabled, the prospect of prison was a special kind of hell, a torment 100 times worse than for an able-bodied man. Arthur Thorne spent a fortune, called in every favor, every dusty political connection to reduce the sentence. But it was futile. Chloe, from her hospital bed, clinging to the last shreds of her consciousness, refused to withdraw the complaint. Her dying wish, it seemed, was to see him rot. The judge, unmoved by the Thorne name now more synonymous with scandal than success, sentenced Julian to 8 years in a state penitentiary. On top of the legal nightmare, the Thornes were forced by a civil suit to support Chloe for life, placing her in the most expensive long-term nursing facility money could buy. It was a gilded cage of suffering. Driven to the edge, the last of Eleanor Thorne's gentleness evaporated. She arranged for a special caregiver for Chloe, a stern, unsmiling woman with cold eyes, whose job was not just to tend, but to ensure that every extra day of Chloe's life was spent in quiet, unending torment, a penance for her son's ruined life. After this final disaster, both Arthur and Eleanor aged a decade in a matter of months. Their hair turned white, their shoulders stooped. The fire was gone from their eyes, replaced by a hollow exhaustion. Their strength was broken, and they no longer had the will to fight for a corporation that was bleeding value and prestige by the hour. Looking around the ruins of their lives, the only person who appeared trustworthy, capable, and, miraculously, still connected to them was me. In the end, they practically gave the Thorne Corporation away. They sold off their remaining valuable assets at a fraction of their worth and handed me full control of the hollowed-out shell, just to be free of the burden. Then they simply disappeared. They began a silent, sorrowful journey around the world, a final admission of a life lived in failure. Failed as parents, failed in business, failed in their very existence. As for Julian, my initial plan was to let him fade into the obscurity of the prison system, to live or die according to its brutal rules. But then the letters started to arrive. The first letter came on cheap, lined paper, the handwriting a shaky scrawl that was a pathetic shadow of Julian's once bold script. Lara, I know you may not read this. I don't deserve for you to read it. But I have to try. I've had nothing but time to think in this place, and the memories of another life have started to come to me. Flashes like dreams. A fire. Your face, different. You pulling me out. And me, the things I said to you. The terrible, unforgivable things. If you lived again, Alara, why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you tell me about the fire so I could have avoided this? We could have had a second chance together. We could have fixed everything. I know I was a fool. Chloe, she was a disease and I was blind. But you were always my light. Please. I'm broken here. The other men. It's a nightmare. You have to help me. You have to get me out. I still love you. Always have. Julian. I read it in my penthouse office, the city lights glittering like a field of diamonds below me. A slow, cold smile spread across my lips. If you had lived again, why didn't you warn me? Even now, in the depths of his despair, his primary concern was himself. His penance was not for what he had done to me, but for what had been done to him. It was the most Julian Thorne sentiment imaginable. I didn't reply. I simply had my assistant, a ruthlessly efficient young woman named Anya, make a discreet call to the warden of the penitentiary. A charitable donation was made to the prison's inmate welfare fund, with the unspoken understanding that a certain inmate, Julian Thorne, cell block C, could benefit from some extra social interaction. I suggested a few specific individuals, men with reputations for being particularly persuasive companions for lonely new arrivals. The letters kept coming week after week through storms and snow. He assumed I wasn't reading them, so each one was written with a more desperate, cloying sincerity. Alara, my love. I dream of you every night. I dream of the oak tree where we promised to marry. I dream of your laugh. I was an idiot, a blind, arrogant fool who threw away a diamond for a piece of glass. I see that now. The pain here is constant, but the pain of losing you is worse. It's a cancer in my soul. Please send me just a word. A sign. Let me know you haven't forgotten me completely. I hope if you read this letter you'll come save me just like you did before. Yours forever, Julian. His words were stupid and laughable. The notion that I would save him was the most grotesque joke of all. I was managing multiple corporations on the verge of global IPOs. My days were a whirlwind of board meetings, international conferences, and negotiating mergers that reshaped industries. I was so busy I barely had time to ring the opening bell at the stock exchange, let alone concern myself with a half-dead man in a prison cell. The only day I would make time for him would be the day he died. Then I would show up, the picture of sorrowful grace, the loyal childhood friend mourning a life cut tragically short. After all, the hundreds of billions in Thorne family wealth he had technically inherited were already mine legally and operationally. Becoming his grieving heir would simply be the final, elegant touch. As for his parents, the people he pined for in his letters, they had already accepted me as their real daughter. They called every week from exotic locations, their voices lighter than I'd ever heard them, sending me gifts from around the world. A silk scarf from Italy, a rare tea from Japan. They had found a strange, sad peace in their exile, and in me they had found a worthy successor. They had effectively erased him. Meanwhile, Chloe Reed lasted only 3 months in the nursing facility. The official cause of death was listed as a pulmonary embolism, a common complication for bedridden patients. But I knew the truth. The will to live had been crushed out of her long before her body finally gave up. The constant pain, the utter helplessness, and the cold, methodical neglect of her caregiver had done their work. When the facility called Arthur and Eleanor, their response was a study in cold indifference. "Serves her right," was all Eleanor said before hanging up. They handed the responsibility of dealing with the remains to me. I didn't bother with formalities. I didn't buy an urn or a plot. I instructed Anya to have the crematorium dispose of the ashes. She, understanding my desires perfectly, took the cheap plastic box and on her way back to the office, stopped by a sewer grate on a deserted side street. With a grimace of distaste she appended the box. The gray dust that was once Chloe Reed vanished into the city's bowels with a soft, final sigh. It was the only fitting place for a selfish, shameless woman who built her life on imitation and lies. The sewage drain was the ultimate destination for the waste she had always been. Julian, however, persisted. His letters became more unhinged, filled with rambling accusations against the guards, detailed descriptions of the horrors he endured, and increasingly florid declarations of his undying love for me. He was a record stuck in a groove, scratching out the same pathetic tune of self-pity and entitlement. I filed each letter away unread, a collection of his despair that I would perhaps one day burn for my own amusement. My life was one of dazzling success and absolute freedom. The ghosts of my past were just that, ghost. They had no power over me. Until the day the call came from the prison warden. Julian Thorne had been found in his cell, unresponsive. He had been transferred to the prison infirmary in critical condition. It seemed my waiting was finally over. The warden's voice was carefully neutral over the phone, a practiced tone for delivering bad news to next of kin. "Ms. Vance, there's been an incident. Mr. Thorne was assaulted by other inmates. His injuries are significant. The doctors are not optimistic." I allowed a measured pause, injecting just the right amount of shocked distress into my voice. "Oh my God. Is he? Will he? It's touch and go, ma'am. You may want to come down." I took my time. I finished my morning meeting, a conference call with investors in London and Hong Kong. I had my hairdresser come to the penthouse. I chose a simple, elegant black dress, understated but exquisitely cut, the perfect attire for a tragic vigil. I looked in the mirror, the picture of poised concern, a successful woman touched by personal tragedy. It was a role I was born to play. When I arrived at the prison infirmary, the scene was grim. Julian lay on a narrow cot, his body a canvas of fresh bruises over old ones. One eye was swollen shut, his lip was split, and he was breathing in ragged, wet gasps through an oxygen mask. The air smelled of antiseptic and decay. A weary-looking doctor met me. Multiple internal injuries, broken ribs, a punctured lung. And there's evidence of long-term, systematic physical trauma. His body just couldn't take any more. He lowered his voice. "It's a miracle he lasted this long in general population, given his condition." I nodded, my face a mask of sorrow. May I have a moment with him alone? The doctor and the guard retreated, leaving me in the sterile, silent room. I walked to the bedside and looked down at the ruin of the man who had once been my sun, my moon, my entire sky. His one good eye fluttered open. It took a moment for the haze of pain and medication to clear, for recognition to dawn. Elara? His voice was a papery whisper, the sound clawing its way out of his damaged lung. Julian, I said, my tone soft, devoid of the cold hatred he deserved, but also empty of any warmth. It was the voice of a stranger. You came, he breathed, a tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. I knew you would. I knew you still cared. I didn't correct him. I simply watched him, my head tilted as one would observe a curious insect. I'm sorry, Lara. For everything. The fire, the things I said. I was wrong. I see it all now. Each word was a struggle, a bloody effort. It was always you. Only you. He was trying to give me the deathbed apology I had once craved in my first life. But it was too late and it rang hollow. It wasn't for me, it was for his own absolution. I know you are, Julian, I said calmly. A flicker of hope ignited in his eye. Can you help me? Get me out of here? To a real hospital? We can start over. I gave him a small, pitying smile. I'm afraid that's not possible. I leaned in slightly closer, my voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. But don't worry. I'm here to make sure everything is taken care of. All the assets, the remaining holdings. I'll manage them. Just as I have been. The hope in his eye guttered and died, replaced by a dawning, horrific understanding. He was seeing me clearly for the first time. Not as his savior, not as his scorned lover, but as his executioner. The hand that had patiently, methodically orchestrated his entire downfall. You. He rasped, a new kind of pain contorting his features. Was you? All of it. I didn't answer. I just continued to smile, that gentle, chilling smile. My silence was my confession. A violent, wet cough racked his body. The heart monitor beside his bed began to chime in frantic, irregular alarm. He was choking, drowning in the truth in his own blood. His hand, frail and trembling, lifted from the sheet, reaching for me not in love, but in a final, desperate accusation. I took a graceful step back, out of his reach, my expression one of serene detachment. The door burst open as nurses and the doctor rushed in, pushing me aside. There was a flurry of activity, shouted medical terms, the hiss of injected drugs. I stood against the far wall, a silent spectator to the final act. The frantic beeping of the monitor slowed, then elongated into a single continuous high-pitched tone. Julian Thorne's one good eye was still open, fixed on me, frozen in a moment of ultimate, terrified comprehension. The doctor turned to me, his shoulders slumping. Time of death, 2:17 p.m. I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Vance. I allowed a single, perfect tear to trace a path down my cheek. It was for the cameras I knew would be waiting outside, for the press release that would announce the tragic passing of Julian Thorne, and for the seamless transfer of his entire estate to his childhood friend and business partner, Elara Vance. Thank you, doctor, I said, my voice steady. He's at peace now. I walked out of the infirmary, the relentless sun of the afternoon greeting me. The air had never smelled sweeter. The balance sheet of my two lives was finally, irrevocably settled. Every debt had been paid in full. The funeral was a small, private affair. Arthur and Eleanor Thorne watched the live stream from a villa in the south of France. They sent a massive wreath of white lilies with a card that read simply, "Rest now, our son." The finality of it was absolute. They had mourned him long before his heart stopped beating. I stood at the graveside, the sole mourner of significance, a black veil shielding my face from the handful of reporters kept at a respectful distance. I played my part flawlessly, the grieving friend, the steadfast keeper of his legacy. The narrative was perfect. The tragic heir, led astray and ultimately destroyed by a toxic relationship, his life saved from total ruin only by the loyal stewardship of Elara Vance. In the weeks that followed, the legal and financial machinery I had built ground into motion. The last of the Thorne holdings were formally absorbed into the Vance conglomerate. The name Thorne was quietly retired from the business world, a relic of a bygone era. My personal wealth, already astronomical, swelled to nearly unimaginable proportions. I was, by every metric, one of the most powerful people on the planet. One evening, a few months after Julian's death, I found myself standing on the terrace of my penthouse. The city below was a river of light, a testament to the empire I had built from the ashes of my first life. I held a single sheet of paper, the last letter Julian had ever written, the one that had arrived the day before he died. I hadn't read it until now. Lara, I see you now. I see the coldness in your eyes that I mistook for love. I see the calculation where I saw devotion. You weren't reborn to save me. You were reborn to bury me. I finally understand. This is my true punishment, to die knowing I created the monster that destroyed me. I hope my hell is warmer than your heart, Julian. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. He had gotten one thing right in the end. He had indeed created me. The weak, love-struck Alara of the first life had died in that lake, and the woman who stood here now was forged in the fire of his betrayal. He was the architect of his own ruin, and I was merely the instrument of its execution. I held the letter over the flame of a nearby citronella candle. The edges blackened and curled, the words vanishing into smoke and heat. I let it burn down to my fingertips before dropping the last fragment and watching it turn to ash on the terrace floor. There was no monster. There was only a woman who had been pushed to the edge of oblivion and had decided to fight back. There was only justice, cold and precise and long overdue. My assistant, Anya, stepped out onto the terrace, her tablet in hand. The board is assembled for the quarterly review, Ms. Vance. They're ready for you. I turned from the railing, the last traces of smoke dissipating in the evening air. The past was finally, truly dead. There were no more ghosts. Tell them I'm on my way, I said, my voice clear and steady. I walked back into the glittering light of my penthouse, leaving the darkness and the ashes behind. The future was a blank page and I owned the pen. The woman who owned the sky had no more time to look down at the dirt. My work was done. My life was my own. The end.